Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to the Process Pros for another week. Today I have with me Cosima, who's joining us over from London, I believe, yeah?
No, from Germany, but...
Me? Stop it. And we have Mark. I think, Mark, you're down in South Africa?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, I got that one right. Awesome. And today we're going to be talking about the journey to process excellence and what that means to organizations in terms of, when you're getting started, what you don't know can sometimes be the things that brings you undone. So Cosima, tell me, when people are getting started on their process to excellence or their automation excellence, what are some of the things that they should be looking at in terms of planning and just getting started in general?
Well, the part is it's about getting started. A lot of people think about just automate. We have to automate. That's where it's going for improvement. And then they start to pick up processes. They start to do it. And I can even speak from my time as a consultant, which was before I joined Nintex. So we started to do it, and what happened is like, oh, can you add this component? Can you add that component? And in the end, we recognized that the process, because we just automated, we did not start actually from a step beforehand to think about it. So we just grabbed what was there, did it, and recognized there's a lot to do. And having that one for more improvement and definitely have a proper digitalization journey, it all starts basically with the very first beginning. Think about your process, get the processes engaged, what are the components? And of course, there's a whole life cycle. It's about for going into the improvement journey. But I know, and that's why I'm really happy, Mark, that I have you on the call here with me, because you are, I come more of the world of automating, but you come from the opposite. You actually help on this process excellence. And that's why my questions to you, I know, there is some step which needs to be considered. I know there's a little bit of a journey to do. Can you just explain or tell me a little bit more how can we start to have a proper digital journey and a proper process excellence, let's say from start to end, that everyone is engaging with it?
So just to start with, in terms of process excellence, it's always better to define what that means. And for me, it's essentially improving the way that businesses create and deliver value for their customers. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be an automation solution or just a process improvement opportunity or any of those things. It could be a combination of technology, strategy, tools, methods, and in combination, that's effectively how you would improve your customer's experience with you. And for me, if you look at it like improving a process internally isn't necessarily going to affect your customers, but your internal customers are also your customers. So we have to look at a 360 view of your organization in order to get to that. And the thing is, not all processes are the same. You don't want to spend hours and hours on a leave process, for instance. You're not going to get external consultants and spend millions of dollars, pounds, rands, whatever currency you're dealing with to improve a leave process because you're not going to derive excessive value out of that. But you also don't want the experience for those users to be bad. So it's a balance. And that's where you would look at things like BPM maturity models, and then you'd consider which to apply where. You'd have a BPM architecture, for instance, to say what are the tools within our organization that we can use, which ones are we going to use for which use cases. So it does vary based on the organization. It varies based on the processes that you're looking at and the desired outcome.
So if you talk about process maturity, you just mentioned, let's say, a word, which is really, really important. And I know this is something we also talk about a lot. 360 view of a company. How does it work? How can we generate this maturity model to really show where are we in the company? So where are we right now? And where are our potentials for either improvement or just, from the processes aspect, people aspect? What type of aspects do you take into consideration in this full maturity model, and how does it look like?
So effectively, you look at it from various viewpoints. So there'll be strategy, there'll be technology, there'll be process definition, then obviously ownership as well. So there's various facets within a BPM maturity model. And Dan, I think we did have a slide showing a BPM maturity journey. And effectively, this is just an example. This is showing from level 1 maturity through to level 5. And the thing is, underneath this, there's a whole bunch of criteria that you would define how you would get to each of these levels and what each of them mean for those different areas within your business. So strategy, ownership, definition, automation, things like that. And you could almost have one of these for each of the processes that you're evaluating. So like I said, the leave process, for instance, we're not going to worry too much about the strategy around leave because everybody needs leave and there's not much that needs to be defined in that tranche. But we'd like to automate it as far as possible, and we want it defined and owned by someone. So those would be high on the maturity level, and you could do one for each of those. One thing to note, though, is just to make sure that we're not getting bogged down in analysis paralysis as well. So you can, especially with high importance processes, ones that make you money or that touch your customers, you could effectively spend years defining that process and never actually delivering any value to your customer, because by the time you've defined it, the customer's moved on, the market has moved on, the world has moved on, pandemics hit us. There's a whole bunch of stuff that could affect the artifact that you're trying so desperately to get perfect. And as Winston Churchill said, perfection is the enemy of progress. So you've got to get to the point where you know what you want to achieve, you've done as much as you need to for each of those processes, and you get information out as quickly as possible so that the customer can start deriving value, and your both internal and external customers.
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. And that's something that you see even in the software world, right, where they've got the notion of MVPs, where you're trying to get features out the door, and it's a case of, hey, we can get this 80% of the way in 3 weeks, but it's going to take another further 3 weeks to get that extra 20%. But 80% of this particular feature can release now, and it's going to solve 90% of the problems. And then we can release the other 20% later to solve the further 10%. And I guess that's sort of that same mindset, right, of being able to get a process out, get it working, and then refining that to actually to start going. Because as you say, if you keep planning and keep trying to get something perfect before you release it, things are going to change and you're going to miss the opportunity to actually to improve anything.
100%. And the other issue is that you have no feedback loop. So you could think that you've designed the perfect process, you put it out to your customers, and they go, this is terrible. So you'd want to get to the point where you agree that this is what you feel the market is looking for. You release that, and you allow your customers to give you feedback on that process, and that then starts that feedback loop. And I think that ties quite nicely into other methodologies that are used, like the Lean, Six Sigma type methodologies that are out there for process improvement, and the continuous cycle of revising that over time. So I think we also had a slide on that, but these are well-defined methodologies that have been around for years. So in terms of the two types, the DMAIC is effectively where you have a process and you want to improve it, and the ADV is where you're actually producing new processes or products that you want to take to the market. So that's effectively where nothing exists and you want it to be created. So both of them are methodologies that have been around longer than I've been around. So you could use these effectively to take a look at the processes that you've documented, apply some of the techniques that they have in terms of identifying waste and trying to reduce the various types of lean waste elements. And then you could create a newly revised process and test that out and send it to your customers as well.
So how would you see it? Because actually now seeing that slide, it reminds me, I never made it to black belt. I'm just a green belt, but definitely I went through the Six Sigma journey. But of course, I know that these concepts are really heavily focused on industry and production. So that's basically when I went through and I can remember. But of course, we are working in the software industry, or basically we talk now about much more. Why do you think it's also important to think about exactly these concepts like lean or the DMIAEC, I have to pronounce it now in English, or DMADV, out of this, exactly this methodology used for Six Sigma, bringing it over into a world where it's maybe offices processes or just other, processes we talk about. So how, you talked about all the value, but adapting this concept and moving it over, how can we, it's easy in a production area, like with the bottles, for example, you have to say, okay, how many bottles you produce, then you look at, okay, how much are broken, how much are wasted. If the waste is too much, obviously you would like to reduce because this is money which is away. That's an easy concept to adjust. How do you see it in the world of what we talk about, process automation?
So waste can be interpreted in many ways. I mean, printing out a contract, for instance, for a customer to sign, if you think about the paper that gets consumed versus a digital document that gets sent out for signature and it gets generated, and there's no wait time between the actual document that was sent out and the signature that comes back, all of that can be time waste, it can be paper waste, it can be people's time that gets consumed doing that. So if we've got systems doing that for you instead of a person, there's people are freed up to do what they're better at, which is thinking rather than administrative tasks. So that's where automation plays a big part, and automation not necessarily just being process automation, but the automation of document creation, the automation of the signature workflow being sent out, and everyone being brought into that loop at the time that they're supposed to. So there's no time waste, and processes are improved in that way.
So if you look also in the world today, because I really like the point waste of, like you said, paper or waste on resources. We live in the world where it's just like we take care of our environment, and we definitely want to improve. But there's another factor which I see like now, waste of resources. Yeah. So waste of people's time, because our time is our value, it's our capital. Do you see as well, from all what you've described, I see a huge value all on that. And I know, there's also coming the discussion up, if I automate, basically people losing jobs, there's all going in that direction. Or if we talk about process excellence, honestly, from what you described, I just see a value bringing also for my time working, my value I bring into the company, and I can concentrate basically more on what's really necessary. But also for me, I have a clear framework I can work because I have the maturity. I know exactly where we are in the company. And you mentioned also the feedback loop. I can also feedback, for example, on a process, what is not working, and be part of the improvement journey. Is that something you experienced as well doing your work, just working on this exactly process excellence piece, or I'm now completely wrong and just too excited for what you just said?
No. That's exactly right. And that's why I say it's going to be different for each process. It's going to be different for each initiative. But ultimately, that's what we want to do. We want to create value for both our customers and our employees, because both are customers of an organization. And the thing is, you want people doing the things that you've employed them to do, which is to think. Most companies have hiring policies that look at what you've done, what experience you have, what degrees you have. They don't look at how much you can type into an Excel spreadsheet within a given time frame. So you don't want people wasting time doing tasks that could be done either by a system or be done completely automatically by an RPA bot or something to that effect. So that would then free up the people that you've employed to do the things that are going to change your organization. They'll have time to say, this process isn't working, why isn't it working? I can make a suggestion. If they're too busy filling in your Excel spreadsheet and that's how their metrics are driven, they're never going to give you suggestions on how to improve. So it's a combination of factors, but ultimately they all roll up into how are we delivering value. as an organization, as an individual working for that organization, and as a customer, am I seeing that value, and does it make sense to me? So you're 100% right. It's freeing up people to do the things that they should be doing rather than the things that take up time and waste resources.
Absolutely spot on. And it was interesting. We were speaking about this earlier today, my time, well, actually yesterday, my time, over here in the States. One of the things that we talk about quite often in Nintex is, being able to free up people to do more thinking and be part of the organization, to add more value to the organization. And we're actually talking about this, and we're thinking around the lines of, well, what about all these organizations that are thinking around, they want to be better stewards of their local community, whether they're giving back into the local community, or they're donating to some environmental cause, or they're just trying to be more sustainable from an organization around their renewables, around carbon emissions, or whatever it might be, right? And we're talking around how, well, if you are automating tasks and you're giving time back to your employees, not only are you providing more value to the company, because you're getting the employees can do more, they can think more, they can be more involved in the organization. They're also getting more time back to do the things that are important to the employees, which is giving back to their local communities, ensuring they've got plenty of family time, ensuring that they are just a more rounded organization by doing all of these things for their employees as well. So it actually was driving a lot more of a conversation around, we're not just driving more value for the company, we're also driving more value for the local communities where these people work, but also to these people that work for those companies as well.
Yeah, 100%.
So that was probably more of a statement than it was a question.
Well, and it's work-life balance. That's something, because we're now talking so much about process excellence and value, for companies. But yes, then it's a valid point you just mentioned. It's not only something, which is driving the value for us, but also as an employee. Work-life balance is a huge topic we have. Look how much work we do. The amount increased. It's online, it's offline, are you ever offline? But I think with one of this concept, there's a lot we can bring into the value from the company, but also from the value from the personal statement, which is basically, Mark, if I got you right, I hope you have to correct me now, because I want to understand everything. But basically, it's we take various components for a process excellence journey. So we take, of course, the tools and stuff what we need, but the first place are the people. So we take the people on the journey. We look that people are engaged on the processes we have, that they are understandable, feedback, improvements. But we also have a look on, okay, where if we need to automate, if we digitize, which tools are necessary? What skill set do we maybe need? Do we need another training component on that one? Is there any risk on my processes taking into that journey? And well, overall, to put it all together, then we have hopefully the full happiness and the full value which can be driven inside and outside the company for everyone. Did I miss any point or anything to add from what you just, what we talked about?
So the one thing that a lot of companies do that I feel they try to put the cart before the horse. So they want to automate immediately because everyone's digitizing and everyone's automating. They don't really understand their process. And it was a mentor of mine from many years ago that said to me, if you automate a bad process, you're just making the poop hit the fan a lot faster. So it's not necessarily that you've actually improved anything. You've just moved the problem from one state to the next. So it's always best to start with that whole journey by defining what it is you're trying to achieve. And that's why those frameworks are around a BPM architecture, a BPM maturity model, they seem like they're slowing you down, but they give you the guardrails that will allow you to ultimately get to the goal that you're trying to achieve. Because otherwise you're doing stuff haphazardly and you've got all these initiatives and none of them are tying back together, and there's no one that's like looking at it from an overarching point of view that says we're doing the right things, we're heading in the right direction. And then once you've defined those processes, you can then say, well, is this actually what's happening? So the manager thinks this is what's happening, but if we go to the grassroots level, it's completely different. And you start doing those interviews with various people in your organization to find out what the actual process is. And then go, okay, well, this is what's actually happening, but is that what should be happening? And then you define what the process should look like. And then you identify whether there's issues in the process or not, and ultimately go, perfect, this is now ready for automation. And then you start that journey. And automation could be process automation, like I said before, it could be document generation that happens through a system rather than someone filling in a Word document and printing it to PDF. And then digital signatures, there's various ways that automation can take place, and only start with that journey once you've understood what it is you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Throwing technology at a problem doesn't necessarily fix it.
Yeah. And another analogy that the same mentor used to use is like, if you've got a really big hammer, everything looks like a nail. So you try to apply this technique, it's not always the right thing to do.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we've wrapped up around time. This has been fantastic, and I think what I will do is I'll get some of those links to some of the examples that you put up, and we'll get it to our site. So we do have a new site coming along soon. It'll be on the nintex.com. Haven't got a URL yet, but it'll be there soon. So do check that out. We'll be also putting in resources from the various chats that we've had. So thanks very much again, Mark. That's been fantastic. Thank you again, Cosima, for joining. And we'll see you all next time.
Cheers,
Thank you,
everyone.
Dan. See ya.
Bye.